Now, when you have a collection of motorcycles, this is a small collection, of course, but there's always some things you learn the hard way. I won't mention anything in specific, but I've pretty much learned everything the hard way. And one of the things I learned is, if you're going to ride through the winter, you better keep your batteries on a battery tender. Now, I typically ride all through the winter, as much as I can, of course. I use the motorcycles basically for exercise in the winter. It's a lot more fun than joining a gym. I find it more fun anyway. But one of the things that happens, even when you leave batteries on a battery tender over the winter, and I have 2 battery tenders, and I move them from bike to bike to bike several times during the day, pretty much any time I'm out in the garage. But here's the bottom line of everything is, no battery lasts forever. And what I found out the very, very hard way is, when they go, they always go at the most inconvenient time possible. They never, on a bright, sunny day, go bad. They always wait till you're about 100 miles from home, and it's freezing cold, and all your friends are out shopping, and everybody's trailer has a flat tire, and then that's the perfect time the batteries go dead. And I say this from first-hand experience. I have been rescued so many times that I finally got my own onboard, the spare boosted battery that I carry with me all the time now. But this video is not about being rescued. It's about changing a battery. And what I've done over the years is, as the batteries have gone bad, and they typically last 3-4 years. Luciano has had one last a lot longer than that, but he's kept it on a battery tender. So maybe that helped a whole lot, but I know one thing for sure, none of them last forever. There's no such thing as a forever battery. And even in the most extreme case, one of my friends, I won't mention his name because he'll probably be embarrassed if I say it, what he does every spring is put a brand new battery in a bike and throw the old one away because he doesn't want to get stuck. And when I heard that, I said, well, that's kind of crazy. Can I have the old battery? But because you never know. Everybody's got their own little quirky things they do. But here's what I've done, and it's worked well for me. As I've replaced the batteries, the typical, either the glass mats or whatever kind of battery, the UASs, the ones that come in the bike, the ones you have to add water to, and the no maintenance ones, and I've got some of everything. I even had a burglar alarm battery in this bike for a while. But all beside the point, I've replaced them with the lithium batteries with really good results, and I have a brand new one coming in the next day or so. And when it does, I guess we can show this up close and personal. The battery in this bike is several years old. The last couple of times I rode it, and I've got my electric heated gear on, I've noticed at the end of the ride, I'll go to start the bike one more time to put it in the garage, and it looked like it was weak. And what happens at that point, no matter how many times you charge the battery, it never gets any better. Now here's a little indication. This is something you can put in the bank. What that's telling me, yeah, that might start the motorcycle. Yeah, and that's a fully charged battery, but that battery is kaput. That's basically the bottom line is, before I get stuck on the road, I want to pull this apart today. I want to replace the battery. So I'll make a quick little video of how to replace a traditional battery with a lithium battery. And it's relatively easy and simple, straightforward, but it's something you might want to see in real life. Now, hooray! One of my favorite things, unboxing. I love getting new stuff in the mail. I don't know why I do. I just do. Anyway, we are ready. And I've said this before, but worth repeating. There's nothing worse to me than being stuck on the road and you know you've done something really foolish, something that basically you could have avoided. And after you get stuck and you trail the bike home and you have a warm cup of coffee, you realize, I still got to buy a battery. So you may as well buy the battery right away. Now, I've bought several of these lithium batteries. I had a ballistic one. I have two of these. These are battery tender batteries. It's always a good idea to read the little do's and don'ts about these. That whatever. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's government regulations. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is these are something that I've used, and I know Luciano has several. Then there's a couple of nice features about these. Now, of course, you can look on. I got this one from Amazon. This is a critical thing when you have a lithium battery. Critical. It's an important thing. The battery is considerably smaller, so they give you a bunch of these hard rubber foam blocks so you can fill a battery box. Now, the really neat thing about the battery tender, they give you extra bolts, is you can mount it on either side. See, some motorcycles, when you buy the wrong battery, it's the right size, but the terminals are on the wrong end, or the drain pipe is on the wrong end, or there's some annoying thing that you can't deal with conveniently. The battery tender battery has two positives, so no matter which way you put the battery in. Now, in my case, it's even better because I can put on an FZR, I have two plugs, one for the electric gear and one for the radar detector, and one for the battery tender charger. So it gives me a lot of choices, and even give you an extra two sets of bolts. So let me show this up close and personal. It's very light, of course. That wouldn't be my favorite reason for buying this. What works is these really do hold a charge in cold weather, supposedly a lot better than the lead acid batteries. I don't know. If you keep them on a battery tender, they are very reliable. So again, the lithium batteries, the advantage, it's a smaller, lighter battery. In fact, the first time you pick one up, you go, whoa, something's wrong with that. And there's little notations: do not recycle with lead acid batteries. You're supposed to dispose of properly. You could read this all, the directions, the warranty. And I've heard from some people, and I'm not sure it's true, but I'll do it anyway, that before you actually use it, you should fully charge it. I don't know. I didn't do that in the past. I put the battery in the motorcycle, left it on charge, and started the bike when the light went green, which has seemed to work for me, but I'm not sure there isn't a better way to do that. The big thing with this battery is to keep it charged with a correct charger, and I have a battery tender charger, which is the correct charger. There are certain chargers, and you can read the fine print in the directions, that tell you don't use, I'm sure, like an automotive charger or something like that. So, but these are a nice upgrade over what I've had in the past. And I thought I'd mention another little thing. This is a ballistic battery. It's lithium ion and 8-cell. This is a battery Bob Navola got for me, and this is a funny story. He was having some charging issues with his Honda VFR. Worth mentioning this. I had given him my spare battery that was a year or two old, but it was a functional, good battery. And I'll explain this in a minute. And what had happened is his bike was overcharging and the battery blew up. It basically went so he bought me this new one. Now, I haven't even used it yet. I've been using it for testing things, but it's certainly a functional battery. But again, in my case, because I'm riding all through the winter, I don't want to have a marginal battery. I want a strong, starts the bike right up battery. Now, another thing that might be worth, just when you have a battery, and I have 4 of them in the cellar that I keep on charge, just spare batteries. And I always put the year it's new, and then when it's been charged. And I try to once a month just put it on the battery tender, even through the summer. So that tends to prolong the life. When a battery goes dead, they get stale, they get old a lot quicker than if you keep them charged. Keeping them charged, lithiums especially, seem to be an important thing. Now, this is the thing I've noticed with lithiums, that you put the same battery tender on a regular battery, and I've got 2 exact battery chargers, and what'll happen is the lithium one will take like 2 minutes and boop, the light is green. The other one, if you let them sit the same amount of time in a garage, let's say 2 or 3 days, the normal battery, or I should say the lead acid battery, will take an hour to come up to green in cold weather. So these tend to keep more of the charge in them. I think that's a safe thing to say, but even so, I like to keep them fully charged. Now, I thought I'd show this. This is interesting too. Forget about the weight. This is the R1, the spare R1 battery, but I wanted to show something here. When you go to replace, and this is a problem we're going to have, it's not a problem, it's something you have to deal with. If you don't know about the lithium batteries, this can be confusing. Well, it's a lot smaller in almost every dimension, so that's why they give you, if you notice, these blocks pretty much simulate. So the one thing you don't want to have, and believe me, you do not want to have this, is you don't want to have, this is an R1, but an FCR is very similar. This is the one thing you don't want to have, is the battery sitting in the battery box and it's doing this while the whole time you're riding, or in the worst case scenario, grounding itself out on something. But basically, you don't want these to ground out, and shaking around. So very important when we do this that we take these are closed cell foam, and get that to fit nice and tight in the location. And as soon as we have our coffee, we're going to get ready and go out to the shop, out to the garage, and get this puppy installed and hopefully go for a ride. But you never know. It's supposed to snow today. Now out here in a tundra, it's good and cold, so we try to minimize the time we're spending out here. And on this bike, relatively easy bike to work on. Battery's right under the seat. You have to take the tail section off. Relatively easy, I say relatively easy. The only thing on this bike, when you have to work on the carbs, it can be a bear. The rest of the maintenance, pretty well thought out. Okay, with the seat and tail section off, a couple little things that I think are important to share. Each one of the circuits that I have, one goes, of course, to the radar detector, one to the electric riding gear, so we can ride in the winter. Each one has a fuse. I always have a spare fuse taped somewhere in the bike, at least one. They're 15 amp fuses, so that here's the thing, if for some reason you do have a short circuit, you blow the fuse, well, the last thing in the world you want to have is that now you can't use your electric jacket and you're 100 miles from home. So having a spare fuse, a spare fuse taped right to the box, it's a good little tip. Now in this case, getting the battery out, relatively easy. We do keep the bike as clean as we possibly can. So this is held in by a rubber strap. We'll take the two bolts out and that'll release the battery. Now the one thing not to do, the one thing that's not a great idea, is to leave anything that can short out against the battery. Once you take these wires out, you want to get these wires out of the way while you're working on this. Another little tip, and this is because I have multiple wires going to the battery, and all these wires are sensitive to plus and minus. I don't want to get any of them interchanged. So what I've done, just put a simple, once I take one side out, a simple zip tie on this side, and that means any of the other batteries and all the other battery terminals are marked with something red. This just ensures that we're not going to wind up somehow crisscrossing these batteries, the battery wires. With the wires out of the way, the rubber strap off, and the overflow on the fuel tank out of the way, just a question of pulling the battery out and cleaning out the battery box. And just look at the physical size difference between the batteries. And by the way, another thing, if you're in doubt, or if a battery, say it's only a year old, you can always try cleaning the terminals and making sure they're tight, of course. But a battery is a replacement item, that's for sure. Unless you're really, really lucky, every few years you're going to be replacing a battery. Especially if you want to ride and be far from home on a cold day. Now, because the battery box is now going to be too small, we're going to have to arrange this in such a way that we have that rubber at all corners and maybe even a piece on the bottom. So that whole battery now will be rubber mounted. And you can see this battery is smaller in every dimension. I already have one of the rubber blocks on the bottom to raise it up so we're not putting a strain on the wires. Just thought I'd show this with the old battery. This can be tricky. You wind up and you have your multiple wires on the top, and it can be that sometimes you just can't catch a thread on a nut. Well, what works for me is in the past I've shimmed that nut up with a piece of cardboard, a piece of a toothpick even, something that raises that nut up, and then you're able to, it's very easy to catch that. Now some batteries you do have to do that, some you don't. And sometimes a simple trick like this, having a little piece of cardboard under the nut, it allows this just to come up high enough that I can catch one thread, and then from that point on, you're home free all. And that, by the way, that is a good tip. And you could be really frustrated sometimes with something as simple as you've got all these extra wire things and you just can't catch that nut. It could make you nuts. Now, another thing I'm pretty fanatical about is keeping records of everything I do to the motorcycles. This is one of my log books that I have various things that I've done to the motorcycles, the dates, and the mileage. And of course, we'll write down when we replaced the battery and how many miles we had on it. Now, it turns out this battery is 6 years old, according to the logs. So I guess that's okay. I guess we got our money's worth out of it by keeping it on the charge. Now, this is really nice. I just noticed, and this is the first one I've had that has this feature. As I go to put the nuts on the battery, it has a little piece of foam glued to the bottom of the nut. So in essence, what happens, that little tip I just showed is totally unnecessary. They've already figured out that that's a pain in the ass, and they put a little piece of foam here to push that nut up so you can always catch the first thread on a bolt. Nice little quality touch from Battery Tender. Also something that's not a real big deal, but you'd want to know it before you did a battery change from a standard battery to a lithium. The lithium, the screws are a smaller size. So you'd really be spending a long time trying to thread that bolt into the nut. And look how nice that fits under there. It holds the nut right up on the top. That is a really nice quality touch. See, that's when people design things that actually do work on motorcycles or cars. You don't have an engineer that never saw a motorcycle or a car designing something. Now, before I sock this down, I took a little piece of fine sandpaper, made that as corrosion free as I possibly can. Now, this can be something that's relatively tricky with these blocks of foam. You'd like to have the battery compressed down there nice, but you don't want to use a hammer or anything to get it in there. I would say this, if you could push it in with one finger, that's perfect. I've got all the thin ones around one side. It looks like this couldn't have worked out any better. They give you plenty of these rubber things to push in there, by the way. So now that whole battery, for all purposes, is mounted in rubber. Oh, even a stock battery strap worked real well. You always want to have the positive terminal covered just so you don't rub a tool up on it when you're working on a bike or whatever. And now the rest of this is all I have to just bundle up the wiring. I have a very specific way it goes on the side of the bike so that I can plug in the radar detector and the electric gear for winter riding. That really is, that's the hardest part over there right now. So all that's left is to put the seat and the tail section back. I hope this video gave you some tips or some information that'll be useful if you have to change your battery. It's so cold out here, I just can't wait to get inside, but there's only one thing left. And it's the best. You work on motorcycles, you freeze, you're out here like, in the tundra. But then there's the reward. At the end of the day, nothing better than that reward. Now, every time I work on this bike, I always want to thank Luciano for all the help he was, especially when we first bought this bike. And it had the leaky carburetors, among other things, and all the things he's shared with us all over the years, shared with me especially. And this bike, believe it or not, it's a historic registered bike. It has really been a great adventure owning this bike. I have had a ton of fun. I've had a lot of good rides. More fun than at least 3 years of track days, and just more fun than you can ever imagine. And always scamming people that it's a real Ferrari. But anyway, I really have had a great time, and this is the best part of all. And I have to say, over and over and over, I just can't believe it. And now all that's left is I have one more tip to share before I end the video, and it is a significant one. And I enjoy sharing information, and I always thank the people that have shared their love of motorcycling, their love of model airplanes, their love of life with me. The passion that we all share. One final tip. And my final little thought and tip for the day. And boy, this has saved my bacon. The first time I had, it was about, I don't know, 6 months ago, I had the battery go dead up by Bear Mountain, halfway to Bear Mountain. Luciano came and rescued me with, let me just take it out and show you, because this is, now that I have a tank bag as part of my stuff, I have a spare tire kit, of course. This is something that's worth its weight in gold. And of course, it's lithium. It's a battery booster. I've used it 3 times. The neighbor's car on a freezing cold day, it was snowing, wouldn't start, started his car right up. I've used it several times with the motorcycle just to see if it would start 2 or 3 bikes in a row. It starts every bike in the garage and still doesn't need a charge. It's crazy. So this is really something, and I don't even know it's bright tech, but if you're going to go far from home, and even if your battery's a year or 2 old and you think it's marginal, if somebody in the crew has this, you'll be saved. Worth every penny. Final tip for today. Anyway, and boy, I've gotten such good use out of this tank bag. It's unbelievable how good it's worked out. So again, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and of course, thanks for watching.